Thank you for the invitation to be here. I would like to begin with apparently a true story. I fly a lot on Southwest Airlines, actually arrived here yesterday. And this is considered to be a true story, so I'd like you just to listen carefully. An airline pilot wrote that on this particular flight, he had hammered his ship into the runway really hard. The airline had a policy which required the first officer to stand at the door while the passengers exit the plane, smile, and give them thanks for flying our airline. He said that in light of his bad landing, he had a hard time looking at the passengers in the eye, thinking that someone would have a really smart comment. Finally, everyone had gotten off the plane except for a very little old lady walking very, very slowly with a cane. She said, "Sir, do you mind if I ask you a question?" "Why, no, ma'am," said the pilot. "What is it?" The little old lady replied, "Did we land or were we shot down?" Intuition is a little bit like, not necessarily a bumpy landing, but it is very much like something that drops in very unexpectedly. Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychologist, said at one point in the early part of his long career and very powerful career as a counselor, as a therapist, in fact, he was known for his establishment of depth psychology, which has taken root here in this country as well as all over Europe, that the voice of intuition was something that just happened. It somehow dropped in as if from some other layer or level of one's soul or being. And as he went through his lifetime, he actually encouraged people to trust it. And he gave a lot of examples of how that could happen. Now, I'm not going to speak about his life this morning, but I do want to speak very, very briefly about the nature of intuition itself. It often arrives unbidden, although sometimes we want it to arrive and it doesn't show up. It arrives suddenly. We may be going from one point to another, and there it is. It just comes in. We may be driving our car, eating a little snack, awakening in the early morning or taking a nap in late afternoon or evening, whenever, and all of a sudden a piece of information suddenly falls into our so-called lap or our consciousness. We may be having a conversation with someone we really don't know well, and as we're talking about one level of information, all of a sudden another piece of information drifts in. How many of you have ever had that happen? When you're talking to someone and all of a sudden, something not at all related to the subject that you're discussing, a whole new piece of information shows up. And that level of your being, we say, is the intuitive level. Now, your ministry talks about, which I talk about all the time, is that we're all connected, we're all one. I really do believe that at the heart, deeply, inwardly, spiritually, we're all one. How many of you ever studied the Course in Miracles, or may still be studying it at some point? The authorship of the Course says that all beings are connected at the deepest level of the being, and that our biggest challenge in an incarnation is to let go of separation. The sense of seeing ourselves as independent and individual. Now, in the outer world, in the Western world in which you and I live, we all see ourselves as independent people. We see an individual body, we have hair color and eye color, and we support all that our individuality is about. And I love that. That's very important. But at a deep level, we're all connected. So when we are together in spirit, when we celebrate, when we sing, when we dance, when we play, when we make love, when we are clearly connected with another human being, we are open to the voice of our own intuition. If you've ever loved another human being, how many of you have ever loved another human being? How many times have you loved another human being? I hope you're still in love. You cannot be in love with another human being of any persuasion, any color, any creed, unless you have some kind of intuitive connection with that man or woman. Now, sometimes we say when we fall out of love that we're not connected anymore, but that's not really true, because we're talking about an emotional experience when we say we fall out of love. That's partly psychological, partly emotional. But when we really are connected, bonded with a particular woman, with a particular man, we don't have to necessarily be in love, but we do feel a connection. And in that moment of connection, our intuition is very, very, very clear. How many of you, when you are in that state, feel like you know this man, this woman, like you've never known any other man or woman in your life? How many of you know that? I need to see more hands. Some of you are still waiting for that to happen, okay? But when you know at that level of your being that you have that level of connection, part of your awareness has to become sensitive enough, your outer awareness, to learn to listen to the information that's coming through. And that will help you then in the form of the relationship. I don't want to talk about relationship today, although I think it's very important. I want to talk at the moment now, I want to shift rather dramatically here. How can we pay attention? And there are some very few examples that I think everybody has had at one point or another, just to show you that it happens. How many of you know when you get a phone call, however you receive your phone messages these days, who's on the other end of it before you look at the ID? How many of you know that? That's your intuition working. How many of you trust that? Before you go and check. Now, we can all go check very quickly, but that's not the point. You have to sense into it before you actually get the message. That's very clear. How many of you have had the call now on the other side to call a parent, a loved one, a friend? And at the moment of the call, that person will say to you, "Oh, you don't know what you are doing right now in calling me. I have so wanted to talk to you. And right now is the moment I have free." How many of you have had that happen? All right. Pay attention to that because your intuition is working for you in that very moment. Sometimes we have another kind of example. We're urged to go to a professional man or to a doctor or to some other individual that we feel can be of service to us. And when we make that call, when we make the visit bears itself out and we say, aha, this was timely. Especially in areas of medicine. I found that out for lots and lots of people will tell me this. How many of you have had ideas that we need to change our business or go into a new direction? We're not quite sure what we want to do, but then somehow we feel like we've got to go take a walk. We have to go visit someone. We have to take a little trip. We have to go somewhere, and in the process of going to the destination, doesn't really matter where, all of a sudden, all this information drops in. How many of you have had that happen? How many of you have spent time on retreats? Yes. Retreats are opportunities for you to step away from your ordinary awareness, your ordinary life, and go into a place where you're open to another level, to another layer of your own being. If you're in charge of an organization, running your business, or whatever else it is that you are responsible for, some level of your being is always connected to that business, to that organization, and your soul is capable of revealing to you what you need, but you need to be able to ask for it. And when you ask for it, you need to trust that it will come. Here are these two suggestions. Ask, and then trust that it will come. That seems like a bit of a stretch, but in reality, it is a profound capacity for each and every one of us, and we need to learn to pay attention to it. Not too terribly long ago, a lady came to see me who was telling me that she had a dream about her husband and his very best friend who were in an engineering company together. They had been in this company for something like 20 years. The wife of one of them, the woman that came to see me, was saying, I had this dream that my my husband's very best friend is embezzling money from our business. And I actually saw in the dream a ledger. And her question to me was, do I dare tell my husband about it? I said, why not? She said, well, am I imagining this or is it real? And I said, who's in charge of the books? Well, my husband. I said, okay, why didn't you speak to your husband about it? Well, she did. Her husband said, absolutely not. This is not true. No truth to it at all. And he was very defensive about it. But she got the dream a second time. She went back to her husband and told him. She got the dream a third time, about 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks apart. And she finally took responsibility for the information, and she said, I know that the problem that we're having financially with our business is due to the fact that not all of the money is being spent in the manner in which it's supposed to be, because his partner, his very, very best friend, is taking money from the business itself and covering it. I'll skip to the chase. They found it to be true. The man had already embezzled almost $100,000 from the business over a period of about a year. And of course, it broke apart the business and something had to be reformed, and that has happened. But the point that I'm making at the moment is not the results that took place, but to trust the revelation that came in the first place. Now, who wants to in some way say, let me rephrase that I'm not going to trust the man or woman that I'm in business with because you're my best friend? That's a tough place to be, isn't it? And that can happen. That's not always the case, of course, but that's a negative example. But it's a positive example because it shows that we are connected and that the wife of the partner was the one who got the information. So gentlemen, pay attention to your wives when they give you some information. One of the things that I think is very exciting about intuitive living is that we live more consciously about the choices we make about what we eat, how we dress, how we support ourselves in the outer world, how we get along with the people that are part of our lives, the men, the women, the children, our families, our friends, and all the other people that are part of the big equation. And that allows us, when we pay attention to this guidance, which is really always available to us, we really connect at a much deeper level and our lives take on a much bigger, broader coloration. One of the women in our church who is a musician, a professional musician, told me just last week that she had been having this urge to call the man that had employed her 20 years ago at a particular location in a particular area of the community. And she kept putting the thought away. She said, oh, that's over, that's done, I don't want to get back, I don't want to see him. And she thought about some of the emotional material that happened between them at that point in her life. And she said, but you know, I let all of that go. I called him, and he said, I have been wanting to reach you. I have a job for you that I think only you could do. And it will pay you something in the neighborhood of $4,000 or $5,000 if you will spend this weekend at this event. And she said, I've been asking for an additional source of money. And I got this idea to call this man. I did it, and she said, it's happening for me. Now, though I could give you hundreds of those kinds of examples, they happen a lot. My invitation for you is to trust the deeper connection that comes through for you. What will block it? 3 things will block it. Fear, your fear that it won't work for you, that you might be wrong, and that you're going to be misled. Let's take them in order. Fear is true for all of us. We all have fear at certain times in our life. We have to face our fears. Facing our fears is about finding out where our strengths are, not our weaknesses. Everybody with me? You face your fears and you find your weaknesses. And you find your strengths, but your strength is really the best. Second, let go of the idea that it isn't going to turn out. What have you got to lose? And finally, stay with your plan and your commitment to the source of all life. God bless you, ladies and gentlemen. It's a big subject. I cannot begin to cover it all. Happy, 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 happy birthday. God bless you.